because of that, IT costs being a big deal, one of the things that I did notice this week is Gartner putting out some IT numbers associated with the IT Expo or symposium that they just had, and there's some interesting trends within those IT numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Gartner is probably of the major analyst firms, one I probably trust the least when it comes to their numbers. I tend to look at people like IDC better, but it's always another good data point. And I think what is really fascinating about these numbers is the fairly significant growth they're seeing, both in what they're calling the Gen AI tax, which I think is an interesting way of looking at it, but growth in general IT spend, but mostly being passed through is sort of the idea that it's spend that software companies aren't capturing because they're having to spend that money on these Gen AI tools. But probably the big shocking one that you pointed out is the data center spending they're predicting is up 24%. And the hard part, and this is sort of why I don't always like the Gartner data, is that they're not very clear from my perspective on where that is coming from. Because if that's including all the hyperscalers and all the major Gen AI players and OpenAI and all those guys, then it's like, duh, yeah, of course we're seeing massive growth.
Mhm.
If these are traditional enterprises and we're seeing a 24% uptick in data center spending, that's a shocking number, like shocking, shocking. They, of course, are attributing it to increases in AI spend or preparing for AI workloads or Gen AI workloads. And if those numbers are true and are coming from traditional enterprises, it's sort of, well, I don't say it's out of sync. It does kind of signal maybe a shift that's happening because everything we're hearing from CIOs right now is that they're in the very early stages, still experimenting. We've been talking on this show a lot about some of the articles about increasing pressure to show results, but pressure to show results and making those first steps is not the same as spending money. And so if we're seeing an actual increase in spend, or at least an anticipated actual increase in spend of that to that degree, that's pretty notable that this stuff is really starting to come to a head.
Yeah, maybe they're just saying that Nvidia has been selling a whole heck of a lot over the past year. No, I mean that's not going to be the entire $100 billion increase, but obviously there's a lot of capex involved with getting AI up and running, and either you have to invest in that or you've got to buy that through the hyperscalers. There's not really any way to get around that conundrum if you really want to invest in AI, and I find that hardware making a comeback being very interesting, but also I thought it was interesting that software spend continues to grow quickly. We are seeing over 10% growth in Gartner's numbers. And I tend to think of Gartner's numbers being accurate on a going backwards basis. I think if you're looking at 2024 and you look at their 2023 spend, I think that'll be pretty accurate. The forecasting, um, I have some issues with. I feel like they tend to look too linearly at trends and not really thinking about drivers quite so much. IDC tends to do a better job. But be that as it may, they are showing some numbers of what is happening right now, which I'm pretty sure are accurate. Gartner has good infrastructure for tracking the current state of spend.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that, the shocking number from data center notwithstanding of software is, of course, the perennial outperformer. And again, they're showing 12.6% growth for 2024. I think the other thing that's notable is that it's pretty much spending is increasing across the board. And this does sync with what I'm hearing from CIOs that I
Mhm.
talk to, that there is, despite all the downturn and all the ambiguity, and generally in an election year in the US, you see a pullback, you see people kind
Yeah.
of
Mhm.
hunkering down a bit. And I think this is a function of Gen AI. It has created so much momentum that people have to be doing something, that everyone is saying spend, this is a rising tide that floats all boats. Everyone is spending. And so I think on the one hand, that's good. I also think that going all the way back to that other conversation we've had is it does lead back to, hey, you better be prepared to show significant results around all of this. And how is that going to happen? So, yeah, interesting data. How much would if I'm a CIO, do I take any of this? Well, my take on it would be, if I'm spending more, that isn't necessarily going to get me a competitive advantage. Everyone's spending more right now, and you better be prepared to demonstrate results from it, because that's going to be where this is driving from.
Yeah, and the political election topic is an interesting one. I'm not going to dig too far into that, but I would say that it doesn't seem like either political party is very excited about really adding AI legislation at this point. That doesn't seem to be an enormous risk. So it's not affecting spend the way that politics typically affects the tech world. So yeah, expect at least on the CIO side, your budgets are either going to stay steady or rise, or you're going to have a special budget point starting to show up for some of this extra spend that your company is going to put into tech.
Maybe we'll have to have a special election show to talk about the non-event, at least from a tech standpoint.